So we are here today to talk about the Gen Zalpha marketing revolution, which is a generation actually coined by the one and only Kristin Patrick here. So before we kick it off, some quick background. I just wanted to share about both of the speakers today. First, the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Paul Woolmington, of course. As was mentioned earlier, cannabis became the world's second largest independent media agency over the last 4 years. So since joining, Kristin has helped secure Claire's spot on Fast Company's 2023 list of most innovative companies. It's number 2 in the retail sector. In addition to that, last year she was named one of Forbes' 50 most entrepreneurial CMOs and to Adweek's and Modern Retail's Vanguard list, as well as one of Brand Innovators' top 100 women in brand marketing. So, stay motion for 50. Now, an interesting fact, Kristin and Paul have known each other for over 20 years. I believe since you're both 21?
Yes.
21, correct?
It was 18.
You've worked together across many notable brands like Pepsi, Playboy, both where you were both CMO at, and now Claire's. So we'd love to understand, where did your friendship first start? Any great stories you can share for the audience?
Well, I went to Paul during my tenure at Playboy, of all places, and said, we need some help rethinking this brand. And that was not an easy task. And I needed a partner who was going to be innovative and crazy, and you fit the bill.
And what was really interesting was it was an all-woman team. I was the honorary woman on that team. We were an all-woman team to reinvent Playboy, obviously with Kristin. I remember her calling in, she said, shall I take this job? And of course I said, look, it's perfect for you, like reinvent this brand. Which she'd done in prior lives, and obviously we've done that. But it was just this most amazing journey. I do remember one anecdote, I think I can say it. But I was the one who had to give the bad news. So there was a meeting with Hugh and his son, and I had to actually explain, and Kristin said, you've got to do this. So I had to say the most searched term about Playboy is Hugh Hefner dead? And I had to do it in front of him. Remember that? It was like, there was this kind of hushed silence, but it was kind of like, you got to get out of the way.
I think it was a meant to be friendship and definitely a collision of the minds. And I was just thinking, I think at the time I was at Playboy and you were with an agency called Naked. So I think that that was kismet.
Yeah, and we've obviously, I've got great admiration for Kristin and everything she's done. She's got this polymath career, an amazing brand marketeer, but she's one of the most innovative thinkers, which was at PepsiCo. I mean, a huge global brand, how she was innovating, creating content, thinking about marketing beyond the dots and stops. And that's been, I think, a hallmark of your career. I mean, she worked at William Morris. There's obviously, worked with some of the biggest. I remember us talking about your Gaga relationship that you had, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And, you brought Gaga into a lot of really interesting roles.
Yeah. I think that the projects we worked on together always start at the same place, though. It starts with defining the brand and getting a really clear vision on what that means. And I think we've done some really unique programs together in terms of getting to the heart of what each of those brands stands for that we've worked on. I was just thinking back, and Playboy, I think, was a great example, but then we took it to other companies.
Yeah.
We brought together a group of creators, makers, people from the music industry. I think we brought a sexologist into that discussion, and we put them all in a room and tried to understand, like, at the heart, what's happening from a cultural perspective? What are your impressions of the brand? And I think that we sort of repeated that at a couple of companies together.
Yeah, and that was right. I think, part of it is all those insights that come together, but then it's also that ownership. I call it about the alignment, and I think what Kristin's done an amazing job of throughout her career is is driving the vision, but bringing people along. That's one of the toughest things, isn't it? And in almost all of these iterations, that alignment around an idea is probably more important than the idea itself. So actually it's that counterbalance of the two things. So remembering these like crazy workshops, they involved all the execs, so everyone felt a sense of ownership. And I do even remember Kristin brought me in just before Canvas, actually, in the early days of Canvas, we did these sessions, remember, for Lay's and Tropicana at PepsiCo. But again, it was like, they were kind of billed as innovation, but we brought in incredible stimuli, didn't we? Amazing collaborators, people who ran, Eater, on the food thing, just to kind of get us outside of, but the ownership was very much those brand teams.
That's right. Do you remember we brought in like an aromatherapy, a smell guy, just to start to think about things differently? And I think that in organizations that can get stuck sometimes, bringing in the stimuli and getting them to take part in the creation of the vision has been incredibly important, because there's a tremendous amount of change management that sometimes goes into the creation of a turnaround, and I think that has been sort of a secret weapon for us.
Yeah, and that's one big thing, isn't it? We're all going through. We have this saying at Canvas, as challenge the comfortable, but everyone lives in a high degree of not feeling comfortable. Who are our competitors now? Every market sector, the audiences, the media atomization, everything is converging. But what is at a meta level even more interesting is Kristin's career has been about a lot of transformations and we're going to talk obviously a bit about Claire's, that the Claire's that if you remember from your childhood versus the Claire's of today is it is a big turnaround story. But PepsiCo was similar, Playboy was similar. There was this theme of your fearlessness of being able to take those challenges on. But I guess everyone has to do that today. You can be the most successful brand leader, and if you're not thinking about what's around the corner, who your competition is or who's going to be your competition, then But that is a theme that...
It is a theme, and I wonder what that says about my personality. I like to go into like busted up situations or something that like needs a turnaround. I definitely am attracted to that. And Claire's was just that. It is a 60-year-old mall-based brand at a time when, we have a generation of consumers who are digitally focused, obviously. And so it was, it kind of pulled out the same formula, put together a group of thinkers, got consumer reaction, spent some time with people who had been at the company for those 50 years to understand like what was the original intent and vision and what was great about the company. And one of the exercises that we've always done is like your brand house is on fire. What do you want to take out of the house and into the future, and then what do you want to let burn? And I've always loved that. And I actually use that quite a bit.
That's a great, it's so profound an exercise, but it's fun, but it literally is. Your house is on fire, your brand is on fire.
Yeah.
What do you save? I know I've got to get my passport, I've got to have the photograph of my kids and family, those two things. But when it's the brand, it really is, okay, what, that was a great exercise.
And I think it's interesting to see the human interaction in those rooms, because if you have executives who've been at the company for a really long time, like there are sacred cows in the room that they do not want to touch. And oftentimes, those are the things that need to change. And so as you go through the course of a day, I think that things start to move a little bit,
We even almost, we would bring CFOs into the meeting. At Playboy, we actually had a venture capital group, a private equity group that had invested in. And it was mind-blowing for them, because they probably were used to PowerPoint presentations, but to see the organic way in which you were repositioning the brand, what you wanted to shut down, what permission we had, I think really liberated this is what it is.
Yes.
But that's right. Having a CFO in these workshops, I often think, is fantastic as well. Because they sign off the money, don't they?
100%. And I think that's the thing that CMOs need to think about and marketing people, it, at the end of the day, is about the connection between the brand vision and the business plan and how you're merging those two things together, because oftentimes what comes out of conversations with consumers is a vision for where you can go. And when we talk to consumers at Claire's, and we target Gen Z and Gen Alpha, the Zalphas, they told us like, hey, we love your brand. We actually want more from you. We would love apparel to go along with the accessories. We would love you to decorate our dorms and bedrooms. We'd actually really like information from you. So you can go so far as to give us style information. You can also tell us about other kids in our generation. And another thing came up which I thought was very interesting, but they said they wanted cafes from Claire's. And we were like, where's that coming from? But I think you're starting to see a lot of brands with Restoration Hardware go into cafes, or American Girl has a cafe. So I don't think that this generation thinks about things so linear, like in a linear fashion. And it gives you the ability and opportunity to think about new business segments that you can get into. And then how do you build capabilities within your company to be able to support the evolution that you're about to embark on. When I got to Claire's, we had a 75-person marketing group that only created retail signage. And it was really project management and retail signage. So we had to build an entire market, like a modern marketing group that could do full funnel marketing from performance marketing down to content creation. And we needed to do it very, very quickly. I'd love to roll the vision video. Maybe. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
So we have a bold ambition, a fresh, fun ambition for the next generation of Claire's. Sure, we're known for our great fashion accessories, our bedazzled baubles, our toys, and our tech, and nearly 50 years of ear piercing. But we can be more. That is why we're unleashing all that goodness and sprinkling it across new audiences, new categories, new formats, and new geographies. Shifting ourselves from a retailer to a global lifestyle brand and playground for exploration, experimentation, and fun. We already love our customers. Now we'll use data so intelligently that we get to know them as much as we love them, predicting their behavior, personalizing their experiences, and anticipating their needs to deliver a dynamic, surprising, and intuitive omnichannel experience. Anytime, anywhere. We are flipping the entertainment model on its head, becoming the creator and purveyor of entertainment across intellectual property, character creation, reality shows, and original series. A Gen Zalpha pop culture destination. We are bringing our customers mobile ear piercing and jewelry vending, interactive flagships with state-of-the-art technology, nail and beauty bars for their every win. This is Claire's. Modern, trend-setting, innovative, and fun. A brand that earns the loyalty of our customers and will become the envy of our competitors. An inclusive world, a playful world, connecting with culture and leading conversations with a voice that's contagious. This is a new world for a new generation. Want to step inside? This is Claire's.
How does the Gen Zalpha generation differ from millennials and other generations? And what are the opportunities and challenges? I'd love to hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, special generation. This has honestly been the highlight of working at Claire's. These kids are so cool. They're super savvy. They're super creative. The way that they think about life is in a very fluid way. So their physical worlds morph with their digital worlds. You hear the word digital a lot, and Claire's really has to live that. An example of that is we took the brand into the metaverse and created our own Roblox game. And instead of naming it Claire's, we created a piece of intellectual property called Shimmerville. And within Shimmerville, you can get a job in a shopping mall as an ear piercer. We put the cafe in the virtual world that the consumers were asking for. And then you can actually buy the products from the virtual world in our stores, and you can collect loyalty points through both the physical and the digital. But, you know, I think that what's so great about this generation is they're bunking traditional norms. They're fluid, and I mean from a gender perspective, they're fluid from the way that they think about their career. So if they think about having, you know, a full-time gig with like a part-time gig on the side, and they also don't want to be one thing. I think the coolest thing about them is they're talking about mental health. This is a generation of kids who grew up and lost 2 years of their like socialization and learning to COVID, and so some of them have, you know, mental illnesses. I hate to use that word, but it you know, and they're talking about it, which I think is cool. And you know, I actually happen to have a daughter who has anxiety, and I didn't really understand what that meant. And it is so prevalent in this generation. You know, I think I grew up being like, oh, I'm stressed or whatever, but this is like something else, and it can be debilitating for this generation. So I think that they are just so incredibly cool and special. But you have to listen to them, like in a way where, you know, I walked into this 60-year-old brand. There were no consumer feedback loops. And so you have to put them at the center of your conversation and decision making. And that meant, you know, how do we build capabilities around that? So we had to build first party data. We set up a loyalty program as a first step. We now have, you know, a couple of years later, 21 million members in it. And we talk to them on a regular basis. They tell you when they don't like something. My socials get bombarded sometimes, but you have to be talking to them. And then what's different for me than my time at Pepsi is like we have our own labs essentially because we have retail stores around the world. And so you get sort of firsthand information, but you have to be reactive. And I think the biggest learning for me is like letting go of image and perfection. Like I have to turn my platforms over to them. So while I love like super polished content and creative, that's not their jam, you know. So I have to, as a marketing person who's been trained to like image and design is everything, really just like turn it over and let them loose on the brand. So that's been a big shift for me. But yeah, that's a little bit about the generation.
So eloquently said, and you know, it's been a privilege to work with Kristin and the team on Claire's, because to reiterate, I mean, there's kind of 40+ million of them out there. They are going to point to the future of media, without question. Their fluid is a really interesting point because their identification is much more fluid than we would any other generation ever. And I think a lot of it comes from the empathy, you know, of how they define themselves. So there's an incredible empathy in that group, which I think also leads to these emotional issues that they're trying to struggle with, you know, social media and all the rest of it we can talk about for eons. But I think the other thing is that the minority is the majority in this age group. So they are multicultural in the majority. So obviously catering for, you know, that diversity is so critical. So the learnings, but all of these learnings, I think foundational, the privilege was, this is the future of all of us. This is this generation that's going to grow up. And they don't have the same media consumption habits. They want content, they want participation. The incredible things, I mean, you know, there were PR ideas like actually it was a competition and someone won it, and Jen Zalpha ended up as CEO of Claire's for the day.
Yeah.
You know, at that one end of the spectrum, that participation was kind of like, guess what? This person, and by the way, it was obviously a huge PR event, but it was probably great for your CEO to kind of go, okay, I'm going to have to sit down and listen to, I can't remember, a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old actually tell me how to do my job, which is kind of crazy. But then content, you know, what Kristin has done, but and it was so appropriate for this generation, whether it was Shimmerville, obviously, probably one of the most, you know, we all are like laughing at Web3, but this was a legitimate, this is an audience that was there, you know, as opposed to many brands that wanted to be there and actually have a little plug in Wall Street Journal. Hands up, yeah. But this was a genuine, but then also, you know, the content partnerships, a lot of this was about But also fashion was so important. So, you know, the juxtaposition, you know, how audacious to have Claire's next to Chanel at the New York fashion shows in Paris. You know, that audacity of kind of, this is the future, we want to point to the future, but these activations were, it was just some of the, you know, and the team I know loved working with your team, social influence, etc. But tell us a little bit about, sorry Jason,
It was a series of precision strikes, right? And I think what we did was we wanted head snapping things to happen over the course of like 1 year, and that's what we had. We had a year because we were about to take the company public, and so we wanted like to very quickly change perception. And so it was, you know, we made Nicole Fornichetti the creative director. So like, what? The guy that did the meat dress for Lady Gaga is now doing stuff for Claire's? Okay, that's weird. And then we showed up at Paris Fashion Week. No business being there, right? We were with Chanel. We launched a store in Paris, and it ended up being like one of the best parties at Paris during Paris Fashion Week. We went into the metaverse. You know, the other thing that we did together, I think that's really interesting, is we combined our media buying power. So we had an agency that was doing our performance marketing, and then another sort of agency that was doing our traditional media buys. We put them together, and I think the power of that like really springboarded us. And that's a big change for us that I've noticed over the last 6 months. Like our organic social connecting more deeply with our paid social has been a tremendous shift for us because we thought about it in silos before, and I think you're going to start to see more of that. We're starting to take our TikTok videos that we developed for organic and putting our paid dollars behind it, and I think that's been a big shift.
Yeah, and that's obviously, look, it was always that integration and just seeing the full journey and being able to then have the proof points for. You know, I think certainly when you first joined, if I could be as bold as to say, you know, it was like, well, like, how do you, increasing the budget, you know, that budget question. But I think over time we really brought the C-suite along with us at the proof point. But that point about the integration, because I think we've seen in our industry this huge shift to performance. And that's obviously great because there's obviously all the metrics around it. But obviously, we're all in the brand game. People who lived at the bottom of the funnel want to go up, but they have a different language and a vernacular. And people that were the incumbents, let's say they're the challengers, and the incumbents are trying to go down the funnel. But I always think, you know, like the really interesting space, and it's a metaphor, by the way, it's not literal, is in the middle of the funnel. Because that's where, you know, your kind of thematic hero activity meets your performance activity, your what I would call hygiene, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense at all, but it's like kind of that's where the magic has to happen, that's where the handoffs are, that's where, you know, one technique can build on another technique, and again, taking that full perspective is good.
Yeah.
I think question with regards to if you're a new brand marketer and you wanted just a simplified cheat sheet, what are the golden rules for targeting Gen Zalpha in terms of marketing strategies? What would you deploy for a new brand?
I think what you talked about, which is empathy, is key. And I know that sounds like a really big concept, but that humanness on all levels, from being open about your platforms and communication with them to like understanding what they care about. I think that that's just in some ways where it's all going, and embedding that in the way that you think about your marketing is, I think you're off to a good start if you start there.
Yeah, that's right. This is a generation that doesn't want to be talked to. If you've got a young adolescent child, then you know what I mean. I think we live it every day. But I think the other thing is that they want to participate. So that was the thing, you know, whether it was a cafe, whether it was the Shimmerville, whether it was, you know, engaging them, having that dialogue with them constantly. And you can't just do it in a kind of campaign thing. You have to put the infrastructure that you can always be on as well. Because that's the old way of thinking, is we're going to launch something and then, you know, we're going to get a response. But they kind of, in this particular environment, and I think, you know, and their media consumption, obviously, you know, they don't know what a linear TV channel is. But they're also, you know, hugely social, but equally, I think they're also incredibly aware of the of how corrosive that can be. You know, they're a part of it. It is a part of the symptoms of it. Creates a lot of symptoms, but they are acutely aware of, you know, the anxieties. I think because it's being talked about more. You know, we're in that first stage, but again, throw everything out of the playbook that you kind of used to know.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good start point. Throw out all your perceptions of marketing funnels and brand and hero media, and you know, that's the fun part of it. Yeah.
I guess closing up. Okay. If you had a crystal ball, last question, how would you say? Yeah, obviously you shared examples of the metaverse, and how Claire's is being involved there, but with Web3, AI, virtual reality, how do you see that shaping the future for marketing strategies for Zalpha?
Oh my gosh, you have to be bleeding edge with all of that. Like, I don't have to just like kind of think about it. Like, I have to be first mover because they are. And you know, that's the scary thing about this marketing job. Like, I go for it. Like, I'm gonna step in it someday and make a huge mistake, but like, you have to have that mentality. You've got to get your CEO there, the board there, and you have to be a first mover. And sometimes we don't know what we're doing, and you know, we're kind of jumping in, and you have to have that, I think, test it out, try it mentality.
Do we have any time for questions, or?
I think we're
One question.
One question. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Kristin. My piercings are from Claire. So as you step into this job where you're taking a more staid company into a more progressive company, who were your first 3, 4 partners or hires that you had to bring in for those quick wins?
First of all, I had to create internal partnerships, right? My CEO and my CFO had to be there, and ultimately we had to get the board there because this, in some ways, was a departure. And getting them to understand that in some ways they were so much bigger than just their fleet of retail stores. They have a brand, and when you unleash that equity, that is incredibly powerful. So I had to create internal constituents, but then I had to build a marketing team. And I actually had to bring in people from the outside who knew how to do this. So I cheated. I brought in people like Paul. I brought in somebody from, you know, my past who understood how to, you know, think about creating a brand positioning. So, and then over time I changed the marketing organization. But it is about creating relationships with the other ELT members and people within the organization, and then finding the right agency partners, finding the right, you know, creators and people out there, and that was kind of what it was. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.